Janet, you can go ahead and begin.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's good morning here. So want to welcome you this morning. This is a combined workshop. And for the ones that weren't on in the past two workshops that I had before, my name is Janet Fox. I'm from Alberta, Samson Cree Nation, it's called. And I've been doing workshops for about 20 years and full-time in the past 10 years. So during the pandemic, it's been mostly Zoom. I am in our provinces, the restrictions have been lifted. So I will be traveling and really looking forward to that. But it still don't know what's going to happen because of the restrictions came so fast. My view is that we'll go back. We will go back to restrictions. So it is still, we have to be so very careful. I am a grandmother of, mother of 4, grandmother of 14. So it's an amazing journey for me when I started doing traditional family parenting. And then along the way, I've added in workshops I feel that are very important because, especially this one, because it's all about, there's such an increase with our First Nations people of sicknesses and diseases, and mainly in the area of diabetes. When I first began this work 20 years ago, it was only older people with diabetes. And today I'm finding it's young people, teenagers, and 20 and 30 years old. Type 1 you're born with, type 2 is developed by how we eat or by how we exercise, how we take care of our bodies. So the increase, a lot has to do also with our history. And this is what I will cover this morning. So decolonizing our diet means changing the diet, the foods that our people were not used to. And when we're healing, we need to heal holistically. We need to use each one of these 4 quadrants. Spirit, you do a bit of spiritual, mental is the things you learn, physical is exercise, the way we eat, emotional is being able to express, and spiritual. Our ancestors always knew about the balance, and we're here, the whole world knows today that we need to have this balance on a daily basis. It doesn't matter how much you do per day. However, we just need to remain in balance. Physical is the most important, because if you're sick, who can you there's no one that you can take care of until you get better. So that's why physical is so very important. Our health in some areas are not improving because we're not eating enough traditional foods. It's also about our people are healing from the disconnect of our traditions and culture. So more people are going back to learning about the medicines, about the land. And I know in some areas even they used to have wild vegetables. So there's a big part of Indigenous food sovereignty right now where people are learning about what grew in our area. So we have different land base right across Turtle Island. And so we wouldn't have the same medicines, we wouldn't have the same plants and areas. So this can be adapted to what fits for your area. So the disconnect of healthy eating began, the colonial policies attempted to destroy our Indigenous food knowledge. So this created the transgenerational health issues that our people are facing. And an example will be, it wasn't until 1950 that our people started to develop diabetes, because on a reserve system, there was nothing more to hunt or gather in that little patch of land that we were given. And so we weren't used to the foods. that were given to us by the Indian agents. So this is what's the transgenerational is what I'm talking about. There is a comeback, especially during this pandemic. I have seen, I was not prepared. My family was not prepared at the time that the pandemic began. We didn't have enough medicines. We didn't have enough teas. And all we had were basic, such as chaga. That was all we had was chaga. And we did drive to BC to get cedar just before the lockdowns happened. They closed borders. So, and then we started to prepare for the elders of what we could, because it was all about building our immunity, which is how our ancestors were. You don't take the medicine when you get sick. It's the prevention part that is very important. And all the teas, all the medicines was about prevention. So the Indian Act undermined traditional knowledge. It took away the teachings of leading a balanced, healthy lifestyle. Foods we were given were flour. Bannock is not a traditional food. It's a Scottish recipe. Sugar, we never had sugar. We had natural. Pork, we never had pigs. Lard, cows, we never had cows here. And carbs. And carbs is what it is that turns into sugar in our bodies. So in the reserve systems, we didn't have access to medicines. So we started to lose our healing systems. And many people grew up, and that's a big part of intergenerational trauma. We weren't taught from generation to generation because, again, the history of our people included residential school. And so many of the diseases that on the rise, cardiovascular, diabetes, obesity, these are a direct result of what has happened in our history. So the reserve system totally changed the way our people used to eat. They could not hunt or gather. There was stress, inactivity when our people were nomadic. Our people moved all the time. And so all of a sudden you're on a reserve system and there is no movement. And also the spirit was so wounded by our people. So emotionally, we were so affected when we were forced to be on a reserve system. Not all people went to residential school. However, we are all affected by colonization. So if you don't know your language, that's an effect from colonization. I went to residential school. I went when I was 6 years old, fluent Cree. I'm still fluent Cree. So it was interesting, or I can't say it was harsh because it was a different era than the people that went before me. However, you still hear, the tragic stories of our people. And this has really come out again since 2015. For years, I presented about residential school. People used to say, we're so tired of residential school. Here we're finding people they were so triggered by what has happened, what is happening right now. I think the unmarked graves are over 1,000 right now, or probably even higher. They are also starting in the US with the residential schools, and that's where they began, was in the US, and then they came into Canada. But those diets in residential school affected our health. The quality of food was so inadequate. And I remember, I suppose that would be harsh for me at the time. I remember I couldn't eat a lot of the foods, and you were forced to eat a lot of those foods. Hardly ever we had healthy food like vegetables or fruit. So I remember getting the odd apple every now and then, where dorm would get the the odd fruit every now and then. The views of food changed for many people because they were going hungry in residential school. Anyone that grew up hungry. And then so when they get older, the hoarding begins, the overeating begins, and that is generational. So usually if there's, I have found in my family system, obesity in the older people, it goes down to generations because you're eating the same types of foods until somebody stops it, until somebody changes that diet. Food was used as a punishment. So it was withheld, so it was psychological abuse. So this is about dealing with the root causes. It's a big part of, we have to heal with the 4 quadrants, but it's a must to deal with the root causes. Just recently, I was in a conference where Dr. Gabor Mate was the speaker. And one of the questions I asked him was, this was online, was early in the year, and I asked him if trauma can be healed in the womb, because that's where everything begins, is in the womb. And I asked him if can you heal trauma? He said, yes, trauma can be healed anytime, but it has to be recognized. You have to acknowledge that trauma. He doesn't believe in coping skills because it's like a Band-Aid. And once you remove the Band-Aid, those root causes will come up again. So it was such a great answer. And that's what his work has been about, is about proving that trauma begins in the womb. And in the first presentation, that is what I covered, was in the traditional family parenting. The Creator made everything for us to use, and everyone owns these medicines. So that's why, for me personally, I disagree when people are paying hundreds or even thousands of dollars for a medicine. When we can learn, we can teach our children, we can pick and harvest our own medicines. And it's learning from the elders, learning from, I've been to Joe Pitawanakwit's workshop. We presented actually at the same conference in Moose Factory years ago. And that was where I learned also how important it was. There was a time when our people were forbidden in the areas where, in the Indian Act, we were forbidden to use medicines, speak language, teaching, ceremonies, dance. But also when the missionaries came, the new religions came, they taught our people that our culture was heathen. So anyone using traditional medicine was viewed as a witch. And that came from the colonizers, because in their country, that's how they viewed anyone using traditional methods. And but we must remember that all the medicines we take today in pill form or liquid form, that comes from a plant. And I think this is what we're forgetting, that before modern day medicines, there were plants that our people knew how to use to treat and prevent sicknesses. So herbal medicine knowledge was passed from generation to generation. World Health Organization estimates 80% of these are still, of the ancient cures are still being used around the world. So the majority of the modern day drugs are made from these plants. An example will be the willow. We have a teaching in the willow in my area, and it comes from the creation story. So the creation story goes, when Creator was making world, he would ask each plant is for a healing. He would ask each plant, how will you work for me? How will you help my children? So each plant would answer. So, and then when it came time to the willow said, I will not let anything negative come through me. So this is why a child, if I don't know if this was in your region, but a child, when they weren't listening or disobeying, or maybe it was something they said, they were told to go get a willow. Our children were never hit. And still today it's like that. And it's the soft spot. That's why the soft spot is there. And it's a direct connection to the Creator. So you could, if you hit a child you could hit out their spirit. So when a child went to go get a willow, they'd come back and the child would be tapped 4 times to remove the negativity. So that's an example. Willow is aspirin that we buy today in the drugstores. That's made from willow. So it removes negativity. It's a pain reliever. Some areas still use, when children are teething, they will use a willow necklace, which is just a little piece of willow, and they put the sinew through it, imitation sinew today, tied around the baby, and the baby chews and sucks on that willow, because Orajel is not healthy for babies when they're teething. So we didn't have that. Our ancestors never had that. So, but willow offerings are still being used right across Turtle Island in some of the communities. We have to be very careful that that bark is all off, and so there's no sharp edges to that little piece of willow. So in the order of creation, tobacco was the very first plant that the Creator made. Then he made all the other plants, cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and other plants, animals. And when he made the animals, he gave them parenting skills. And when he made people, those animals gave their skills to the people of parenting. So you'll see any animal in nature, it's always about to provide and to protect. So in the early years when raising children, they were always outdoors, but that approach to learning changed during residential school. So many things were affected because our children were not raised on the land. I've been in your community a couple of times, 3 times maybe. And I remember Rhonda, I believe Wayne's wife, was telling me about grounding, that our children do not have access, or they're not on the land hardly anymore. There's somebody in the waiting room, Heidi. Okay, so anyway, she was telling me about how the benefits of grounding. We are always on like vinyl or cement floors, and we're always wearing shoes, but children never have that opportunity, or us as adults, we never have that opportunity anymore to be touching the ground. So just this summer, because I live out in the country now, I used to live in the city before, and I wouldn't go out because they used to spray the areas there. But where I live today, back in my community, I'm able to go out and just walk barefoot in the grass. So it's really the benefits. But I remember Rhonda saying that she had started where children have time. They spent about 10 minutes per day with their shoes off and just being able to touch the ground. But the health benefits of it is amazing. By when we have forgotten that it's a big part of our, being balanced in our body. So why we use tobacco? This is how I found out. I used to give tobacco because everybody was doing it, but I never knew the reason why. So tobacco leads the way for everything that we do. It's protocol, we call it, and we do it before we do a workshop. We do it before we do a ceremony, prayer, work. And this morning I smudged for my work today. And that smoke, it carries our prayers. So our language dictates to us as what the medicine or berry is for. There's always that root word, and it tells us what that means. And our language has a spirit. Creator gave us these languages, and our people did not make these up. And the largest language group on Turtle Island is the Algonquin language group, which is from BC right up to Labrador and right into the States. I've been to Labrador. I can understand their language if they say one word at a time, but because of the dialect, I get lost. if they speak in a sentence. So it is, but it's that root word that is the teaching. For an example will be raspberry. So we say uskan. Uskan is bone. So we say raspberry ayuskanak. Uskan is the key word here. So it's bone growth. Chook cherry, itakwahaman. I don't know if you have chook cherries in your area. Just nod. Oh, you do, Heidi. Thanks. So chook cherries are a source of adding onto your health, the way you describe it in the language. Strawberries, mite is heart, mite minas berry. So it tells us, and creator made plants that look like body parts to tell us, he gave us clues. Just amazing when Joe taught me all this. Tea, any tea is dehydrating. Any tea is a medicine and it flushes out the toxins. I want to talk about the hormones in the foods. And this has totally disrupted that 4-life cycle of child, youth, adult, elder. We now have children transitioning to womanhood, young men transitioning to manhood when they're not ready spiritually or mentally or even physically. They're not ready. And it's because of the hormones in the foods. Some of the communities I've been to, at first I used to find it so shocking, and then it became it seems like it's normal now. So 7 and 8-year-old girls are having their menstrual time at that age. And throughout the years, I've seen that it was getting younger. And when I first began, of course, it was around 12, 13, and today 7 and 8. So how do you tell a 7-year-old you are now a woman? It doesn't make sense. And this is why I'm saying that how the foods have totally disrupted the 4-life cycle. And the hormones in the foods go like this, where they inject the animal with a hormone, fast growth, more meat to meet the demand of the public. So that food now comes to fast food outlets, it comes to grocery stores, and there's hormones and everything unless it's organic. So we have to educate ourselves about what it is that we're eating. So if you look behind the package of meat that you buy, if you see strange writing, no doubt that's probably a chemical or the hormone. And I started to become interested in this when I started to research why was it that at the time that young girls were making that transition at a young age. So it has been very difficult in communities to explain to the young girls about this, and because you can't teach them that they are a woman, but you just need to teach them about the protocols and the safety and the respect, and eventually you add on to the teachings each year. The same with the young boys. So if we teach the young people today holistically, and I believe statistics will change in the future. Chemicals in the cereal, they have found traces of Roundup in Cheerios, instant oatmeal, granola bars, Lucky Charms, breakfast bars. You're gonna wonder, what am I gonna eat today? So, and they have found traces of Roundup. And I just want to share this story, and I just think it's so shocking for my community. My friend and her daughter were driving through our community. She's seen a field just freshly, turned over by the farmer. Most of the non-indigenous people rent our lands. So she needed some dirt for some plants in town. So she went and grabbed it, used her hands, and you put it in a bag. By the time they got into town, which is about 15 minutes away, her hands started to swell up. She had to go to emergency, and it wasn't until the end of the day that they found out that it was a chemical in the soil. So I can't believe I found out since that there are no laws or anything that they have to follow when they use our lands. So I'm thinking that it may have been Roundup. I don't know what kind of chemical it was. Regardless, there shouldn't be chemicals in the land. So in the north, it's so much better because there are no, I'm sure there's no farmers that are using chemicals like that, but we just need to be so aware of it, especially when we're in the urban areas. And this herbicide, this Roundup, it causes cancer. And another one that I used when I was raising my children was baby powder. Years later, find out that there's asbestos, and the company tried to cover it up for years about the court cases. And I didn't know at the time, of course, baby powder had asbestos in it. For a long time, you didn't see it in drugstores. Dollar store used to sell it, just the little bottles, but the huge bottles, when I was raising my children, you hardly ever see those anymore. And then there's preservatives. Preservatives means exactly what it says. An example, you could buy chicken nuggets today. They'll look the same in 6 months. There's enough preservatives in there to make it look like as if you bought it today. In 6 months' time, they'll look the same. And one with the shelf life, it's all about the shelf life in food. So if you see the Twinkies with the fruit filling or the icing inside and they roll them up, the chocolate, that one has a shelf life for up to a year. So we need to educate ourselves about the foods that we eat. Sometimes you'll see, and I know it's like in jam, because I buy jam that say no preservatives. So I look for those types of labels, and it's education. I had to educate myself about, how I shop. So there's pesticides. They have found pesticides in everything, fruits and vegetables, peaches, they even coloring. They have, done the coloring of like oranges. Oranges are not orange to begin with, but they use a dye to make it look like orange. So peaches, apples, peppers, all of those, they all have pesticides. So it's washing as much as we can. It's also about growing our own food, shop organic or local. Container gardening is the best because where your dirt came from. And so for me, it was a lot of work to begin to start this new process. There's a doctor that did a documentary in a community. He's a Métis doctor, and he works in Vancouver. So he did a documentary called My Big Fat Diet. You can find it on YouTube. And what happened was he was diagnosed with diabetes, wouldn't accept it. So he was going to do different options, change his diet. And so the community he worked in, the Alert Bay, it's on the island, he introduced a low carb diet combined with the First Nations diet to address the growing epidemic. His first client was diabetic for 17 years, overweight, and took 4 shots of insulin a day. So within 2 weeks of changing the diet, he had normal blood sugar and was off insulin. So total amount of the time that he did the documentary, it was months, was 46 pounds. And so Dr. Wortman was diagnosed. And so today he's not diabetic because he changed the diet. He stopped eating carbs. Carbs is what turns into sugar when we eat them. And if you remember the Canada Food Guide diet, remember they used to have this huge plate. It was just packed with food, and 45 to 60% of that was carbs. And him and his colleagues said that we should change that diet a long time ago. They have about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, the Canada Food Guide diet has changed, which is mostly a protein diet. Protein is what our ancestors ate. And it was a diet like our ancestors, that protein diet. So protein is mostly meat. You stay full for a long time. When I make shakes, I add a protein powder to mine. And I really believe it works when you eat protein. But when you eat things like carbs, you're just hungry like in no time. And also you get sleepy. An example will be when you get sleepy after you eat, it's because the carbs are taking such a long time to go through your system. And this is why people just get tired. So the intervention he did, cut out bannock. White bread is the worst. Turns for me, if I have to eat white bread, it just hurts right here. The sugar, there's so much sugar packed in that white bread. So I use whole grain, brown, but rarely, if I'm visiting somewhere and they have white bread, of course I'll eat it to be polite, but it's the worst food there is white bread. Sugar, he cut out sugar, pasta, potatoes, rice. I have found it very difficult to cut this all out. So for me, it has been in moderation. So he ate more vegetables, wild meat, fish, and wild plants and berries. So the education for our communities is find out what were the wild vegetables in your area, and they grew everywhere. So many of them are finding them and bringing them back to their communities. So the dietary change was a big thing for him. And he's not diabetic today, but you can buy the Art and Science of Low Carb Living. And that's that's that protein. It's like an Atkins diet, but you have to be very, they say that when you go on an Atkins diet and then when you fall off it, it seems like I know a couple of people that were on it, and it seemed like they gained, when they fell off it, they gained more weight after. So you have to be very strong, I suppose. Okay, so water is a cleanser. When you drink water, it hits your organs, cells, muscles. In the middle part, the cell part, that's where the toxins get stuck. The cell part is where, if they get stuck there, that's where diseases can start or start to harm our organs. This is all my grandparents drank, and it was, to describe this drink, it means all herb drink. They used to gather the medicines and boil it all, and that's what they drank all day. We never had bottled water, we never had pop. So I don't remember my grandparents ever being sick, and they were quite elderly when they passed away. And they moved all the time. They walked daily. My grandparents, they walked to the store, was about maybe 2 miles, and then they walked back 2 miles. So every day they did that. I just couldn't, I always remember that. So chaga grows on black birch. It's called the king of herbs. It's for liver health. You can buy it in health food stores, but it's very expensive. Plus, you don't know the energy of that chaga that you're buying. How was that person when they were picking this chaga? What if they were angry? What if they were sad? That energy passes on like this. That's how the energy works. So it's best to learn how to pick your chaga. It grows up high. Sometimes you're lucky if it falls on the ground. It's dark on the outside and tan inside. So it's also for cancer, and it boosts the immune system. These are the plants that Creator made to give us clues. It's the same in our culture. The first time I started to learn all of this, I was visiting an elder in Jasper, Hinton, Alberta, actually. And he took me outside of his house because I wasn't raised traditionally. I've had to learn what I know. and I wasn't raised on the land. So this was his way of teaching me awareness. And so he took me outside of his house and he picked up one of the low growing strawberries. And he asked me what it looked like. I didn't know because I'm fluent Cree. He asked me, how do you say it in Cree? And that was when the connection for me, because it describes the heart. So you know that the creator gave us a language, he gave us the clues. So, and then he took me to a poplar tree and he took a leaf. Now I know what he's wanting to hear. So I said, it looks like a kidney. He said, then he would know that this is for kidney medicine. So we just have to be aware. So this is why I know organizations across Turtle Island are now starting at daycare level. They're doing medicine walks at young age, basic medicines. So as they get older, they will add in more of these teachings. And we need to go back to that to, to make the change, the health of our people. So ginger, shaped like the stomach. So when they say drink some ginger ale when you have an ailment, but I was reading recently, not recently, last year maybe, is that there is no ginger in ginger ale, but I still buy it. It still works. I don't know if it's the power of persuasion, but there is no ginger in ginger ale. I don't know if they've changed it since, that they were exposed. Celery is for bones. Grapes for your lungs. Pancreas, it's shaped. A sweet potato is shaped like a pancreas. We've all heard this one. Eat your carrots, improve your eyesight. Then after Joe's workshop, I used to hear this growing up. I used to think it was a total scam. So when I first came home and after Joe's workshop, the first time I bought carrots, I cut it up. The very first time I actually looked at a carrot. So that's the connections that I finally made. Strawberry is your heart. Tomato, the 4 valves. There's cartilage and small bones in your ear that help heal the inner ear. And whatever nutrients the mushroom has helps heal the inner ear. I sat with the doctor in Toronto at the Best Start conference, and she was telling me about in India, they only eat 1 walnut per day for the brain and 2 almonds a day for the eyes. I always forget to put in a picture of almonds. And she said when she came to Canada, she said it was like recommended you eat a handful of nuts a day. She said it's not even needed to eat those handful of nuts a day. All you need is a walnut and 2 per day for your eyes. So the clues, that creator left us. Anything with a pit is for fertility, balances hormones, prevents cervical cancer. Takes 9 months for an avocado to be full growth. So when people have arthritis, the bones start to come up like this here, these little spots on the willow. And those are the clues on a willow. So they use this for arthritis, pain relief. I mentioned about the teething necklaces. And so it's a pain reliever, and that's what aspirin is made from. Cedar is for your blood system. So cedar tea is very bitter. So eventually when you start to make the cedar tea, you will know how much cedar to put in a pot of tea. I mix mine with a regular tea bag. There's okay. So berries, well, here's the superfoods. And this is what, for me, so when the pandemic started, it was all about boost your immune system. And that was what our ancestors, that's what it was for. So these are the superfoods: blueberries, cloves. You see lots of elders put cloves in their tea. I always wondered why. Green tea, sweet potatoes, yogurt, almonds. Those are the superfoods. And I remember just really reading up about, because nobody knew about the pandemic as much. I remember reading about it, and the answer was to boost your immune system. So any sickness is always about boosting your immune system. This young woman is from the States. She's a university student. She did an experiment using crushed chook cherries and sarcoma cancer uterine cells. And she has pharmaceutical companies that are following her now. I'm not sure what happened after, but this was couple of years ago that I added this story. So she used the pulp of the berry and the cells, nothing happened. She used the juice of the berry and nothing happened in the cells. But she used the crushed chook cherries, and it killed those cancer cells. So it doesn't talk about what killed those cancer cells in the study, and I'm sure it's because of the communication, because of the pharmaceutical companies. This is why they're following her. They're trying to find out. So my friend from Saskatchewan, I was telling her about this study, and she also she's a harvester. And she told me, I bet that what killed the sarcoma cancer cells would be the pit of the berry. She said that the pit has cyanide, and she said there's not enough cyanide in there to kill you. She said, and then that's when my brother was telling me about the language. When you eat crushed chook cherries, it means you're adding on to your health. So it's been just amazing. And this is all I grew up with, is the crushed chook cherries. I remember my grandmother, we found her a flat rock and another rock, and she'd crush those chook cherries. And so harvest a lot of, berries this year. Hardly ever anyone uses it with a rock, so it's usually meat grinders that they are using. But if your family ate this, even per week, a couple of tablespoons a week, I believe that it's the prevention part. And we all have the word cancer in our language. The Algonquin language means bugs. We say mantosak, which are bugs. So everyone has bacteria, but it's all about how we take care of our bodies, how we cleanse. The gut is really how you have to cleanse it all out. And it's very important to understand that the gut is where everything starts. So you have to flush it all out. That's why they say eat a lot of fiber. Okay, so cranberries, bladder infections, plaque buildup on teeth, dandelions, blood cleanser, detoxifies liver. I just presented recently with midwives from Manitoba, an organization, and they were talking about how they use this for postpartum milk flow. In the stem of the dandelion, it looks like milk. So they put a drop of it in juice or water, and she said the milk comes almost immediately. Cloudberries, not sure if you have it in your area, but mostly in the northern parts. And in our language, it's called brain berry. Mistiguan, or actually head. Mistiguan is head, berry is mina. And the clues again: gooseberries, those lines across the gooseberries, that's how you describe the gooseberry. Esa pumuna, meaning health throughout your whole system. Blueberries, cleanser for your whole system. Strawberries, heart. Raspberries, bone. Rosehip, and women that are going through menopause use rosehip tea. And what they do is they gather the roots, they use everything of the rosehip and even the plants around the rosehip. And that's what they gather, boil, strain, and then that's what our ancestors used, and they didn't have symptoms of when they were going through the changes. I have seen rosehip jam, all these things, but you can also buy rosehip tea. I've seen it in a drugstore. So when we were preparing bags for the elders in the first pandemic lockdown, we just we had no choice but to buy them from the drugstores, some of the teas, because nobody was prepared. Plantain for stings, for burns, ulcers, infections. The teas have an abundance of muskeg tea in my area, and I'm going to have a cultural camp coming up here. So this is something, that's the only thing that we can pick here. To pick sweetgrass or cedar, it's not anywhere near here. Maybe mint we can pick. So, but it's packed with vitamin C. And we start drinking this around September before flu season. So if you're picking in your areas, if you have muskeg in your area, that's where it'll be, the muskeg tea or Labrador tea. It lowers blood sugar, lowers blood pressure, eczema. So it's a darker shade of spruce. You boil a couple of, well, 5 this lady used that she made, I seen. She made like an ointment. She boiled this with caribou because they have caribou in the Dene area. And she let it harden. And this is what, so if you have medicine camps in your areas, that's also very key to have them in your area. So the prevention part is education to our young people, to everyone in our community, to do the prevention part. Make the teas available for the elders. If they can't pick, pick for the elders. The youth, you start teaching them holistically, and it creates that awareness of health. So learn about Indigenous food sovereignty and healthy and culturally appropriate food. I know in some areas, especially in northern Alberta, where we have the tar sands in Fort McMurray, many people don't fish there. The water's been contaminated so bad. The land has been contaminated. So everything would be. So many people don't even pick medicines there. They don't hunt there. They don't fish there because how the land has been so affected. Okay, so that's the first presentation. We'll take a 10-minute break and we'll come back to finish healing our spirit. Thanks.
Miigwech to you, Janet.
Uh-huh. Oh, darn. Okay, we'll start again. This is the last presentation, and this one is all about taking care of our spirit. It can be repetitive from other presentations, so I won't go through that. Anyway, I'll just continue. So this one is about how can we take care of anyone when we don't take care of ourselves first. I like the 7-generation story. It's about ending cycles in our families. Whatever we do today to heal ourselves affects future generations. So your work is very important, and parenting is the most important position that Creator has given us. And He has given us children, and they are gifts. They also have brought us gifts for us to learn from. So it's all about healing the 4 aspects. And the 4 aspects I mentioned in the last, it's all about balance. You're off balance, you'll feel it when you're off balance. For me, when I'm off balance, I'll give you an example, is if I don't walk or eat right, all the other 3 are affected. It seems like I can't think properly. I can't do it. It's all affected if it's something that begins with the physical. So our energy, the water, we're mostly water. 60 to 80% of our bodies is water. Anything with a spirit, everything with a spirit will feel your energy, especially children, pets. They will feel the energy. They will feel that when you're sad, you can't fool a child because they're in a spiritual state from 0 to 7 years old. You will always feel other people's spirits, also their energy. And people can take your energy. You can be affected by their energy, especially if they're sad or if they're angry. The positive energy would be when someone's happy and they pass that on to you and they uplift your spirit. So it's all about the balance is the water. Whenever you feel not in balance, the things that I do is I just go outside. If I'm not able to go outside, I just take some deep breaths and shut my eyes and just focus on my breathing until my water becomes in this movement again. And this is the movement that when we were in our mother's womb, this is that movement. When we're off balance, our water becomes like this, and we feel it throughout our whole body. So this is why everything begins in our mother's womb. So in the first presentation, I was speaking about how so many things are going on inside here. The child is being prepared, body, mind, spirit. This is why this has to be this way in this movement. Everything, if a mother is sad or angry or fear, then the water is this. Everything is all affected of the development of the child. And that's what Dr. Gabor Mate talks about, is how he grew up in an environment of fear because of the genocide in Hungary at the time. And for me also, I was not ready to be a mother. I was not ready to, I hadn't dealt with any trauma in my childhood. So I was worried about what did I pass on to, especially to my first child. Okay. So moon time is a powerful energy. And these stages here of the moon is the same stages a woman goes through on a monthly basis. Every 28 days is full moon. Every 28 days is a woman's cycle. And her body goes through these changes exactly like this moon. And when the full moon comes, this is why we say moon time. And it comes from the creation story. the moon was given the task, Grandmother Moon was given the task to regulate the water on Earth, the balance on Earth. And this is why the tides move every full moon and the energy shifts during that time. It's been proven more accidents happen on full moon. Men are especially affected at this time, especially if they're around women on their time. And this is why they had strict protocols. Our ancestors had strict protocols. This has not been taught for a long time. So the elders say this is why we have chaos in our schools. They talk about how an example would be like if a girl walks into a classroom during her time, all those young boys are affected. Their minds are affected, their emotions are affected, and even their voices can be affected. So a woman on her time has powerful energy. And this is it's one of the highest ceremonies that a woman goes through each month. And we need to be aware, men need to be aware. So some of the young girls that I know of, the mothers and grandmothers, my friends, they keep their daughters at home because they raised like this. They're taught or put sage in their shoes so they don't affect anybody around them. Emergency rooms are full at this time sometimes, and it's because the whole world, the shift of the energy is all affected. So we just need to be aware of, of that shift. So we were all affected again by history, what happened to our people with colonization. First of all, the displacement, we lost our lands. The emotional, we were all affected, the family disconnection. And the mental was that approach to learning changed and traditional knowledge was devalued. So children weren't raised on the land anymore. And the approach was classroom. And so our people, it affected our people in this way. So that's why land-based learning is so important. There's a system called the Waldorf school system, which is really our ancestors' teaching. When you teach a child with those 4 aspects, you create a culture of children that become so caring, so mindful. They have such awareness when you teach a child this way. So that's why I'm saying the land-based learning camps is so important for our young people today. Lateral violence has been why there's such a stall in the healing movement. And my friend Gerald Auger, I work with him quite a bit. He's a motivational speaker in my area, and used to live in Hollywood, and he's done some amazing healing work for himself. He talks about how we became lost in the Western world. We forgot who we are as First Nations people. And we became so Western world. We forgot our values of kindness and all the virtues. But so we fell into the different forms of lateral violence. And this is why healing has taken a long time in communities. Jealousy is one of the main ones that I've experienced. And it's like that story of they call it the Indian crab story, where all these crabs are in a bucket. One tries to get out to make a better crab life, but everybody pulls them down. And so that's jealousy is one of them. In workplace, gossip. In a community, gossip. So when in the teachings of gossip, when we say heart, so whatever you say comes from your heart to hear, and you can either bless or curse people. Even your thoughts have energy. Your words have energy. The reason why people gossip, low self-esteem, it gives them a sense of power at that time when they're passing on this gossip. It's very difficult in a workplace. I have worked in areas where I couldn't, I couldn't deal with it anymore. This is why I formed my own company and worked by myself, because it was just no time. I just felt there was no time. There was so much work to be done, and there was no time to be fighting against lateral violence. So it's all about healing, the healing of everybody in the workplace. Oh, this was, I have this on here now. I always forget to take it off. I may as well speak about it. Is the respect is the highest value. Boundaries, and this was in a workplace that they wanted me to include, was because people were wearing perfume in the workplace and people have allergies. For me, I get migraines, headaches from perfume. So it's all being kind to each other is basically what it is. And how you get away from lateral violence: walk away, set boundaries. Don't let anyone gossip with you. Just even put up a big sign: no gossip in my office, no gossip in my home. So the key is don't participate. So your physical health is all this: eating properly, exercise, laughter, rest, hobbies, keeping mind active. Another thing that has come from the pandemic is, for me, I started making jewelry because I just was so lost. I'm sure other people were like me. I was so used to traveling across Canada. So I had to find something. I tried different hobbies, and finally I came across jewelry, and I just love it. I just love making that jewelry. You have to keep your mind active. Our ancestors say, our people never had Alzheimer's. We never had dementia, our ancestors, because they were always doing something. They lived a life of preparation. They were always moving, gathering. They lived from moon season to moon season. And this was how you keep your mind active. Understanding how my emotions affect my health. So it's not about having an absence of emotion, but understanding the value of emotions and moving forward in life. Stress causes disease. So you can't go to bed with all that stress every night. You have to release it. Journaling, prayer, speaking to someone about it. You have to let it out, but you can't go to bed every night to carry that same stress. And otherwise, in the morning, it's still there. You've carried it all night, and eventually it affects your health. So the water, this is a picture of a real baby in other workshops that I did. So it's all about balance. Take some time out for you, drink lots of water. Remember the energy and how it affects other people, your energy. I like this: heal the child and the adult will appear. Otherwise, if it's never healed, we will have older people still acting like children, because that it'll stay from the child stage to the youth stage, adult, even the old people stage. If old people are still getting angry, temper tantrums, it's because they're stuck in the child stage. So, and again, trauma can be healed at any time. And when I speak about how I was very childlike with my first child, it was because I carried that trauma from child. When a child doesn't know how to communicate, they have temper tantrums, scream, anger. They don't know how to communicate. So I carried that into the next stage of the youth. Became very good at it. And so now I move over to the adult stage. I didn't start to learn all these things until I was in my 40s. And I was very childlike. And it was like growing up with my children, I always say, because I learned so much in being a parent and wanted to do different things with my first grandchild. I wanted to end the cycles within my first, to end the cycles. So I'm not an elder, don't consider myself an elder, but when I get there, our language teaches me that kisewatsuin is love, and that we only teach with love. I've never had rites of passage, but I have attended ceremonies. So the elders say if you've never had rites of passage, you can do your own. You could do it in a community, gather the woman or the men in a community, learn from the next community. We can never totally live how our ancestors lived. However, we can start doing the rites of passage. We can't do it once every 4 years because youth are growing all the time. Their hormones have shifted. So we have to do as much as we can to adapt. Some of the rites of passage I feel are so important for me is sexuality. It's we don't talk enough of it to young people. Safe sex, parenting, so many things that we can teach to prepare them, important milestones. So if you've never had rites of passage, go and learn what they do in the next community, come back and start doing it for your community. You can learn teachings all the time. It's available while the elders are here. It's so important that I know in my community, we lost so many elders during this that they got sick from the pandemic. And it's like a library is what they say when they pass away. Grief is what holds us back. So deal with the grief, the anger, and the healing. That's how, for me, I was able to move forward. How I moved forward was understanding the history of what happened to our people. I always wondered where my behaviors came from. I didn't realize it was from the child stage, from that lack of love and residential school. And so I had to deal with that, but I had to learn the history, my history, from my local area. And they don't teach it in the schools or university. The true history, they never talk about things like Columbus was lost and called us Indians. He thought he landed in the West Indies. You never read about that. So I teach my students this, my grandchildren this, about how Columbus was lost. And we're not Indians. I hardly ever use the word Indian. We are indigenous. Indigenous means when we belong to the land. The reason why we're made from the four elements. So when Creator made man, he took Aski, which is earth. Then he took the water, we're mostly water. He took the thunderbird. He took the sun and put it here because that's why we have the warmth inside. And then he took the wind, which is the oxygen, that is the air. And that's why we belong to the land. It all goes back when we go back to the spirit world. That's why they say we have to prepare each day as if it's our last day, because we don't know when our last day is. So each day to be kind, to be helpful, to remember who we are as Indigenous people. Okay, unresolved grief and trauma, that's what held me back for many years. I had so much anger. And again, it was because of what happened in my early years. And Dr. Gabor Mate talks about how he lived like this environment of fear for 10 years, the oppression and the fear. And then he says, First Nations people have lived like this for 500 years since colonization. So the massive addictions that our people would have. So grief leads to addictions. It's to numb the pain. Okay, it's a different era today. They, from our ancestors, they always understood balance. They knew that water has a spirit, and children were raised with so much knowledge. So we can always go back to this at any time, in our households, in our schools, in our communities. So how to move forward? Healing the spirit. And my brother talks about to not revisit that trauma all the time. He said, visit it once, twice the most. Go deal with it, but get tools to move forward. Otherwise, pretty soon, your spirit will stay back there. And so just a reminder, you don't need to revisit the trauma. I disagree with trauma-based programming. Western world, that's all they offer many times to our people is the trauma-based. And it's our people have been through enough. And I don't believe we need to go through trauma healing. It's most people when they heal, they go back to learning about their language and their culture. That's healing. When we start to reclaim forgiveness, I had to forgive. I finally understood why I didn't have any teachings, why I didn't have any parenting skills. It was learning the history. I was able to forgive. They could only teach me with what they knew at that time. So at any time you can learn your language and your traditions. Grief, 5 stages of grief. The first stage, when we have a change in our lives, trauma is described as when life is not the same again. So you have to adjust your life. You can't stay and move forward as if nothing has ever happened, because that's denial. So the first stage that people go through is denial and isolation. They want to block out the pain. They can't face the reality of what has happened. And I've gone through this a number of times. And for then, but I do know now, since learning this, that I can't get stuck ever in any of these stages. So, but for now, I remember the first time how it buffered that immediate shock of the change in my life. Stage 2 is anger, and we redirect our feelings to anger. Whenever we have an issue in our lives, and then we don't deal with our emotions, when it's time that our emotions come out, it's anger that comes out the first. Bargaining, a need to regain control again. If only Creator, you do this for me, I will do this. I will be like this. That's bargaining. Depression, it's sadness and regret. And these are all stages. We may not go through the same grieving process. We may not go through the same stages or in the same order, just giving you a guideline. Many times all a person needs at this time, the ones that are grieving or changes in their lives, is maybe they just want to be with someone, but you don't really have to even speak as long as you're there beside them. And it's called spiritual companioning. We never had psychology. We never had counseling. Our people never had that. We only had each other. And that's what spiritual companioning means, is to be a friend again to someone. The last stage is we get to the part of acceptance, making our peace. Social interaction sometimes can be limited. But someone to check up on the people that are going through a hard time. I know during the pandemic, it's been hard for a lot of people, a lot of mental health issues in our communities right now, because we were not used to this, the complete lockdowns, and so the quarantine. So helping with grief, make time to feel the emotions. Take care of yourself at this time, eating, going out for a walk, do something special. We have support groups, even if it's sewing quilts, beading, making skirts, that's a support group. Doesn't have to be necessarily about grief, as long as you're around people and different energies. So these are the things that happened when I started to heal. It was like becoming more compassionate. I was more forgiving, kinder, and able to love, because we grew up with not being able to express love. Nobody showed us love. For 4 generations in my family, it was hard to show affection. It wasn't until my healing began. They're very easy to love as babies, but as they got older, I had a hard time to hug my children. Okay, so when the 4 aspects are not in sync, it will influence your health. So importance of expressing emotions. Okay, now we went through the last presentation about the water and the hormones. This is why they say 8 cups of water a day. Be aware of your thoughts. Your bodies are like magnets. It has energy when you have a thought. And an example is, if you know about this or not, it's working all the time. An example will be, you think of someone and all of a sudden they'll text you, they'll call you, or you meet up with them. Nothing is a coincidence. So be aware of your thoughts, have good thoughts, and you cannot have a negative thought and a bad thought at the same time. So you can switch it by thinking of a good memory. And when I say our bodies are like magnets, whatever we think about the most, we attract. And so if you're a negative person, only negative things will happen. So positive thoughts is the key. And again, it's a teaching of our ancestors. So taking care of our spirit, I like this picture because it reminds me of my childhood. When I started to heal, I started to remember good memories. My father, my family, we were able to leave the community after the permit system was gone. So my father worked on farms. Within no time, my mother would have a setup like this in a tent, those four corner tents. It wasn't a teepee, but it was set up like this. So eventually I started to remember good things when I started to forgive. So how do we heal our spirit? Change your thoughts, become a positive person. And in 1990s, 1996, actually, I read a book from Louise Hay, and it's called Healing Your Own Body. And this is where I learned, she has since passed away, but she was a pioneer in the healing movement. And this is where I learned about changing thoughts and becoming a positive person. About maybe 9-10 years ago, The Secret came out. I used to watch that over and over again. And it's eventually, you start to change your thoughts. And it's worrying is no point in worrying, because all you're going to attract is more of it. So how do we heal our spirit? Change your thoughts, become a positive person. A negative mind will never give you a positive life. Okay, we're almost done. So for me, when I forget at times about worrying, when I start to worry, I have lots of affirmations. I have a manual that I have added these on. When I have something that I have no control over, we have no control over anything actually. So my affirmation is, all is well in my work. Nothing I can do, but I can't worry about the same situation. Pay attention to your words, change your language. I remember when I was a parent, some of the words that were very damaging to my children, one especially to my oldest son, and I would tell him, quit lying. So I would never say that to my grandchildren. So I'll say it's okay to tell the truth. So words can be very damaging. So figure out or write down the words you can remove and change it differently. Use a virtue word instead. Remove any labels that were given to you. You're not a child anymore, but each time that memory comes back, give yourself an affirmation. How do we restore our spirit? Learn from your mistakes. Reframe your story, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Okay, restoring spirits, also about volunteer. Make your community a better place. We make mission statements in parent groups of what is our purpose? Why do we get up every morning? We have mission statements for our workplace. And many times we don't look at that mission statement. Why am I here? Why do I go to work? Why do I wake up every morning? And so we make, the parents make mission statements. So it's a purpose. And so it's all about, what do you want to teach in your home about the virtues? And we don't teach enough. We don't spend enough time about virtues. I was reading a study, 46 seconds for fathers per day to talk about a virtue. That's not very much. 46 seconds, not even a minute, to talk to a child about a virtue. So it's we either role model the virtue or we speak about it. So if you're using 7 grandfather teachings, get a set of cards. I have TP teaching cards. We have 15 poles. Each pole represents a virtue. So it's we need to spend that time with a child each day, or even to remind ourselves, or in workplace. Okay, so that's my last presentation. Want to thank you, Heidi, for all of your help, and also Alice. And I met Wayne when he was a teacher in Attawapiskat, and that was how we connected, and met him and his wife, Rhonda. I believe that's her name. Then he invited me to Temagami. My worst experience being in Temagami were the bugs. What black flies? Is that what they called? Yeah. Oh my goodness, I couldn't stand it. It was really hard for me coming on the boat, and all these flies got into my hair, and oh, it was just I've never experienced that. So,
Black
but
flies,
anyway,
mosquitoes.
what's that?
Black flies and then the mosquitoes.
Oh,
And
okay.
this
I
year
never.
we're having a particularly bad season for pine bugs too. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but they are everywhere.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's just I remember that ride, the boat ride, and how I tried to tie up my jacket, the hood, and oh my, the couple of them got in. Oh gosh, I had a hard time. So couldn't find it. But anyway, I really want to thank you, Heidi, for your help. And Alice, if you see Alice, you let her know that I want to thank her for inviting me. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm going to check in the chat.
There wasn't anything in the chat so far, but please feel free to speak up. Anybody who has a question, you can raise your hand, or just go ahead and ask Janet. I like that a lot of the information, you're just reminding us of what our ancestors already knew, basically, and it's already within us.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to have these reminders to kind of get back to our spirits, right?
That's what Gerald Auger, my friend, talks about, how the pandemic brought everybody, the whole world, down to its knees. It's like we had time to reflect of our lives, so many things to think about. We were still, we were calm, we were in one place, we weren't so busy. He said this is going all over the world, worldwide. He speaks on international Zoom sessions of all things, and just amazing what he shares with us. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to log off and thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah, be nice if we could do an in-person for sure. I'm hoping to, I was invited to Sioux Lookout. I couldn't make it, but I don't know if Ontario's even reopened, but they were hoping by that time that they would be reopened. All right, so with that, have a great day, and I hope to be in your community again. Thank you.
Miigwech. Thanks everyone for joining us.